The maitre d' recognized me the moment my family walked into Maison Belle, the most exclusive French restaurant in downtown Chicago. His expression flickered with recognition, but he maintained perfect composure. "Good evening," my sister Bianca said with her usual air of entitlement. "Reservation for Riviera, party of 4. I lingered behind them, watching my parents and sister perform their well-rehearsed display, checking the lighting in their designer sunglasses, adjusting their Rolexes, laughing just loudly enough to draw attention. They hadn't wanted to invite me to this birthday dinner. I only got the message 2 hours before. But appearances mattered, and they couldn't risk anyone asking why Elena Rivera, the eldest daughter, wasn't at her father's 65th. "This way, please," the maitre d' said, guiding us across the marble floor. I caught subtle nods from the staff, quick, discreet, but unmistakable. Bianca eyed my navy shift dress with obvious disdain. "Surprised you didn't show up in one of your clearance rack gems," she murmured. "Some of us prioritize substance over status symbols," I replied calmly. "Yes, like budgeting for that Matchbox apartment," she smirked. "It's giving. Modest means." Mom gave us both a sharp look as we sat. "Girls, not tonight. It's your father's birthday." Dad was already examining the wine list, eyebrows raised. "These prices are absurd, complete rip-off." I smiled faintly. I knew the actual wholesale figures. I set those prices myself. Bianca glanced up, voice dipped in mock concern. "Do you need help choosing Elena? Maybe just go with an appetizer. Something manageable?" Before I could respond, a familiar face approached. Mark, one of my most trusted restaurant partners. They didn't even look at him beyond a second. To them, he was just another server. Then he spoke. "Welcome back, Miss Rivera. Your usual table was booked this evening, but I hope this one is acceptable." My father choked on his sparkling water. Mom's menu slid from her perfectly manicured hands. Bianca's expression collapsed into confusion, then disbelief. "It's perfect, Mark," I said with a smile. "Shall I bring out your preferred wine, Miss Rivera?" he asked, not missing a beat. "The 1982 Chateau Margaux?" "Yes, please," I answered, as if he had just detonated a social grenade. Dad's eyes widened. That bottle alone cost more than his monthly golf club dues. "Elena!" Mom leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "What is going on?" I took a sip of water, savoring the moment. "Maison Belle is one of my holding group's flagship locations," I said simply. "We acquired it last fall." "Acquired?" Bianca echoed, blinking. "I co-founded Rivera Capital in 2019. We specialize in boutique hospitality acquisitions. This is one of 12. Silence blanketed the table. Dad set the wine list down like it was radioactive. 12 restaurants? Hotels too, I added casually. I just usually prefer to keep work and family separate. Mark returned with the wine, uncorking it smoothly. He poured it with a deference my family was no longer sure how to process. "To your birthday, Dad," I said, raising my glass. They clinked awkwardly, still reeling. The thing about being underestimated? It makes the reveal taste even better. Especially when it's a 1982 Bordeaux. "Oh, didn't I mention?" I said, folding my napkin neatly on my lap. "I bought Maison Belle 6 months ago, along with the entire Rivera Hospitality Group." Bianca's mouth opened and closed like a stunned goldfish. But you live in that tiny apartment," she sputtered. "And you shop at normal stores?" Mom added, blinking in disbelief. "Because I choose to," I said simply. "I've never measured success by square footage or designer labels." Just then, Mark returned with the bottle, presenting it with practiced elegance. "An excellent choice, as always, Miss Rivera. Shall I inform Chef Laurent to prepare your favorite dark chocolate soufflé for dessert?" "That would be lovely, Mark," I said with a warm smile. "And please bring the full tasting menu for the table. It's a celebration after all." As Mark stepped away, a heavy silence settled across the white linen table. The kind of silence only possible when people realize they've spent the evening mocking the very person who signs the checks. iPhone buzzed softly beside my plate, probably an update about the new Tokyo launch or the London flagship's permit approval. But I ignored it. Right now, this moment was too delicious to miss. There they were, my family, reeling in the revelation that the struggling daughter they pitied actually owned the chain of luxury restaurants they loved to flaunt in. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. Dad gulped his water like it might magically wash away the awkwardness. Bianca was under the table, likely Googling Rivera Hospitality Group ownership. Me? I picked up the leather-bound menu, though I could recite every dish by heart, and casually flipped it open. Dinner was about to become far more entertaining. The tasting menu began arriving course by course. Seared scallops with saffron beurre blanc, duck confit over truffle risotto, and a citrus palate cleanser served in hand-carved glass. Chef Laurent was clearly aware I was in the room and pulling out all the stops. My family, however, was unusually quiet, picking at their food with the uncertainty of people dining in a home they no longer understood. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "So, Elena, how exactly did all this happen?" I took a long, slow sip of the Bordeaux, savoring its richness. "Do you remember that MBA program you refused to fund?" I said, turning to him with measured calm. "The one you said was a waste because I focused on restaurant operations instead of Diana's finance track?" He shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by the candle centerpiece. Bianca, red-faced, attacked her foie gras like it owed her money. "Well," I continued smoothly, "it turns out there was a real demand for modernizing luxury hospitality management. I built a platform, raised capital, and River of Capital took off." I placed my glass down. "We now own 32 properties across 3 continents." Mom's fork clattered against her porcelain plate. "Bouquet in New York, La Maison in Paris, and that charming bistro in London where you celebrated your anniversary last year." I smiled. "The one you bragged about scoring impossible reservations for." Bianca paled. "So that's why they seated us immediately when I dropped the Rivera name," she said weakly. "Indeed," I said, "though next time, maybe don't insult the staff. If you've ever been underestimated, you'll want to hear what happens next." Tap subscribe so you don't miss the moment Elena's success forces them to finally say the word she never thought she'd hear. "We were wrong." "They tell me everything," I said softly, just as Mark returned with the next course, an off-man scallop dish plated like art. "Chef Laurent's newest creation," Mark announced, setting the plates with a flourish. "He'd like your opinion, Miss Rivera," before adding it to the spring menu. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly, doing silent math in his head. I recognized the look. The same man who once told me I was wasting my potential on restaurants instead of joining his investment firm was now re-evaluating my entire existence. I took a bite of the scallop and nodded with a pleased smile. "The London location opens next month," I added casually. "We're already booked out for the first quarter." Mom's fork paused midair. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But you said you couldn't afford to join us in London last summer." "I was there," I said simply, "overseeing construction of the new Maison Belle. I stayed in my own penthouse instead of the family hotel." Bianca's phone buzzed beneath the table, probably one of her socialite friends texting in shock. Word gets around fast in this city, especially when your favorite upscale bistro turns out to be owned by the person you mocked for wearing flats. Bianca looked up slowly. "Is that why you never moved? Why you didn't buy a bigger place or designer clothes?" I nodded. "I prefer to invest in things that matter, like paying my staff the highest wages in the industry, full health coverage, education stipends, career advancement, not just status symbols." As I spoke, the sommelier approached discreetly. "Miss Rivera, the investment group is here again. They've reiterated their offer to purchase the Rivera Hospitality portfolio." "Tell them what you always do, Philippe," I said with a smile. Philippe bowed slightly. "Not for sale, at any price." Dad's hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. "Investment group?" he echoed. "Morgan Stanley," I replied, dabbing the corners of my mouth with my napkin. "They've been trying to buy us out for months. Last week they offered 12 times our annual earnings." His expression was worth every sleepless night I'd spent bootstrapping the business. The investment banker who once called my business plan cute but unrealistic was now speechless. Mom leaned in, her voice laced with confusion and guilt. "Darling, why didn't you tell us? We've been so worried. You've lived so modestly." I met her gaze. "Because success isn't about flaunting wealth, Mom. It's about building something real. something that outlives Instagram photos and cocktail parties. I gestured subtly toward the elegant space around us. Everything here. I built it. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family name paving the way, just grit, work, and a vision no one believed in but me. Bianca's face had shifted from shock to quiet calculation. So, about reservations, she said lightly. I imagine we don't need to call ahead anymore. I smiled and reached for my glass. Reservations are still required, I said, then added without blinking. And your name doesn't carry any weight here anymore. In fact, I said, smiling sweetly, you may find some of our locations mysteriously fully booked when you call. The dessert cart rolled up just then, carrying Chef Laurent's signature dark chocolate soufflé, paired with a vintage 1975 port that probably cost more than Bianca's entire handbag collection. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, lifting my glass. Dinner's on me, as it has been, by the way, every time you've eaten at one of my restaurants this past year. They blinked. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't just owning the restaurant. It's letting people realize they've been unknowingly dining on your generosity all along. The port was exquisite, deep, bold, with just enough sweetness to soften the moment. Almost as satisfying as watching my family try to choke down their pride with dessert. As coffee arrived, the dynamic at the table had shifted. Gone was Bianca's mocking smirk, replaced by stiff smiles and thinly veiled attempts at charm. Mom suddenly remembered a dozen friends who would love to invest in my next project. Dad, for once, was quiet. I could almost hear him replaying all the times he'd boasted about Bianca's junior position at the firm, while referring to my work as that little food thing. Just then, Mark returned. Miss Rivera, he said softly, Chef Laurent would appreciate your feedback in the kitchen, whenever it's convenient. The London menu still needs your final approval. Bianca perked up. Oh, could I come? I'd love to see the kitchen. I smiled politely. I'm afraid it's restricted to staff and owners only. Health regulations, you understand. Mom tried another angle. Darling, we must host a celebration. To think, our daughter, such a successful restaurant owner, I finished, setting my coffee down. Strange, that wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was just managing a single storefront. Before they could respond, Philippe appeared again, this time with a leather folder. The finalized wine list for London, Ms. Rivera. Also, Mr. Thompson called regarding the Tokyo property. Dad's head snapped up. Toko? Opening next spring, I confirmed, though I'm sure Bianca can fill you in. She was just there last month, remember? Trying to get a table at Maison Jolie in Paris by name-dropping Rivera. Bianca flushed, sinking slightly into her chair. I didn't know they'd tell you, she mumbled. I leaned forward. They always tell me. Every rude comment, every entitled demand, every time someone tries to skip the line or argue over prices, it all gets back to me. I stood, smoothing the black dress they'd silently mocked earlier, blissfully unaware it was a custom piece from a Paris atelier I personally invested in. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, placing my napkin on the table, I need to speak with my chef. Mom reached for me weakly. But it's your father's birthday dinner. I turned back with one final smile. And I've paid for it. Just like I've paid for every meal you've enjoyed in my restaurants. I gave a quiet nod to Mark. Please, make sure my family has everything they need, I said, and add the standard gratuity to their bill. Bianca nearly choked. Wait, their bill? Of course, I replied with a gentle smile. Just because I own the place doesn't mean everything's free. That wouldn't be good business, would it, Dad? He didn't answer. In the kitchen, Chef Laurent greeted me warmly, already laying out the preliminary menu for our London launch. We moved through wine pairings, seasonal adaptations, and plating details with the ease of longtime collaborators. Through the kitchen's glass panel, I could see my family seated in awkward formation, leaning in close, whispering now. The dynamic had flipped. They were no longer the center of the restaurant, just guests. In my house. My phone buzzed softly in my blazer pocket. A text from Bianca. I'm sorry. For everything. For how we treated you. Then another. From Mom. We were wrong. So wrong. And finally, one from Dad. I never saw it. Your vision. Your potential. Can we talk? Please. I paused, fingers hovering over the screen. Then I typed one simple message and sent it to all three. Reservations required, 3-month waiting list, no exceptions. Then I put my phone away and turned back to the artful line of soufflés Laurent was perfecting. To the empire I'd quietly built while no one was paying attention. To the success no one in my family had ever believed I could achieve. Later that night, I walked through the cool, minimalist space I called home, my apartment, as they knew it. The entire top floor of a Gold Coast high-rise. Technically an apartment, functionally a penthouse. The furniture was simple, the lighting warm. I liked it that way. I paused at the framed review on the entry table. It had been published just months after I bought Maison Belle, back when everyone thought it was a vanity project destined to fail. Unknown buyer transforms struggling bistro into culinary juggernaut. Unknown. Underestimated. Unstoppable. I smiled, picked up my phone, typed out one final message to the family group chat. Next time you judge someone's worth, remember, the person you're looking down on might just own the ground you're standing on. Then, I opened my laptop, pulled up the architectural renders for our Tokyo flagship, and got back to work. Because in the end, success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about continuing to prove yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest taste doesn't come from the finest wine or the perfect soufflé. It comes from watching the people who once doubted you realize they've been dining in your success all along. I know I'm not the only one who's ever been doubted, dismissed, or quietly shoved into the background while others claimed the spotlight. If you've ever been told you're not enough, or that your dreams are too small or too strange, then this story is for you. If my journey spoke to something inside you, I hope you'll hit subscribe, not just for me, but for everyone who's still working in silence, building something extraordinary while being underestimated. Leave a comment below. I read every single one. Tell me, have you ever been overlooked by the people who were supposed to believe in you most? And here's what I've learned. Success doesn't always wear a designer suit or scream for attention. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the form of resilience, patience, and long nights chasing a dream no one else could see. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. Just keep showing up. Keep building. Keep proving yourself right. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your quiet work behind the scenes, it counts more than you know. Let this be your reminder. The person they overlooked today might just own the ground they're standing on tomorrow. So stay strong, stay focused, and when the moment comes, don't gloat. Simply stand tall and let them realize who you've become.